Ever wonder, like, what makes certain comedians, just blow up and become these huge names? We're looking at some recent rankings and trends, and it's really interesting. We picked out 3 in particular that are all super popular right now. Dave Chappelle, Bill Burr, and Nate Bargatze. And what's really kind of cool is that they all have totally different styles.
Yes.
But they've all managed to really connect with audiences.
Yeah, it's amazing, right?
In such a big way. So we kind of wanted to dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, let's do that.
And see what we could learn about what audiences are really looking for these days.
I think one thing that's really interesting is how these comedians they're almost like brands now.
Right.
They're not just stand-up comedians.
Yeah.
They're cultivating their presence across so many different platforms.
Yeah, it's not just about going to a comedy club and seeing them live.
Yeah.
They're on Netflix. They have podcasts.
Right.
They're using social media, and that's how they're really building these dedicated fan bases.
It's become so essential in the modern media landscape.
Yeah.
You have to have this multi-platform approach.
Yeah, totally.
And I think what's really fascinating is how each of these comedians tailors that to their specific style and their target audience.
Right.
Like take Dave Chappelle, for example.
Yeah.
He's really not afraid to dive into any of the controversial issues of the day.
Especially social and political issues.
Right.
And he really kind of goes there.
Yes. And that resonates with a huge audience.
Yeah, and a really diverse audience, too.
Absolutely, yeah.
He's not just preaching to the choir or anything. He's definitely pushing some buttons.
Yeah.
And that's led to some pretty interesting conversations, right?
Yeah.
I know his recent special, it sparked a lot of debate about cancel culture and free speech and stuff like that.
Absolutely. And I think that's what's so interesting about Chappelle is that he's using comedy as a platform to really have meaningful dialogue about things that are important to people.
Totally.
He's not giving easy answers.
No.
He's asking tough questions.
Right.
And he's making people confront uncomfortable truths. And I think there's an audience for that.
Right.
An audience that's tired of just, superficial comedy.
Yeah, they want to think about it.
Yeah.
They want to.
Okay, so you've got Chappelle on one end of the spectrum,
right?
And then on the other end you have Bill Burr, who's almost the opposite in terms of style.
He is, he's much more.
He's very unfiltered.
Yeah.
Politically incorrect, some might say. And
Yeah, he definitely offends some people.
Right.
But there's also a huge audience, especially younger people, that just love him.
Right.
So what do you think it is about Burr that's so appealing?
Well, I think it's his honesty, right? He's this raw, unvarnished, kind of cynical voice. And maybe he throws in a few expletives here and there.
Yeah.
But he's not afraid to offend. And I think in a way that's refreshing.
Yeah, especially for a generation that's kind of grown up.
Right.
With all these perfectly curated online personas,
Yeah, it's like an antidote to that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, is it really honesty though? There's got to be an element of performance to that too.
That's a great point.
How much of that is actually truly unfiltered, and how much of it is kind of playing into this persona?
Right.
Can that still be authentic?
It's a blurry line.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah. I think, even if it is
right.
a curated persona to some extent, I think it still taps into this desire for something real, something that feels unfiltered in this world of, facades and everything. Yeah.
So we've got, Chappelle, who's diving deep into these complex social issues. We've got Burr, who's just so unapologetically raw and unfiltered.
Yeah.
And then we have Nate Bargatze, who's kind of this
breath of fresh air.
A breath of fresh air, exactly.
He's so clean. He's so relatable.
Yeah.
He's just talking about everyday stuff.
Right.
What do you think is behind?
I think there's just such a need for that these days, right?
Yeah.
We're just bombarded with information, negativity.
Totally.
And I think he offers this.
Wonderful escape from all of that.
Yeah.
He reminds us of the simple joys of life, right?
Right.
The humor in everyday situations. And I think that's incredibly appealing.
Yeah.
Especially when everything feels so intense.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah, he's like that friend that you can always count on to find something funny in any situation.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's so comforting.
It is. It's kind
of and familiar, you know? It's the kind of comedy that you can watch with your grandparents and your kids.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to laugh.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that speaks to something else, too, this idea of connection. He's bringing people together through laughter.
Yeah.
And I think, that feels increasingly rare.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
So, we've got 3 wildly successful comedians all doing their own thing.
Yeah.
But clearly connecting with audiences in a big way.
Yeah.
What does this tell us about?
I think it tells us that there's a real fragmentation of taste right now. People want different things from their comedy.
Yeah.
But I also think that there's this underlying desire for authenticity.
Right.
No matter what the style is.
Right.
So whether it's Chappelle and his, thought-provoking social commentary.
Right.
Or Burr and his completely unfiltered rants.
Yeah.
Or Bargatze with his just relatable everyday humor.
Right.
They're all connecting with their audience on a genuine level.
Totally.
They're not just telling jokes. They're sharing their perspective, their vulnerabilities, their own unique way of looking at the world.
Totally.
And people respond to that.
Yeah. So it's less about like finding the right formula or something and more about finding your own voice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And really owning it.
Owning it, being authentic, understanding your audience, knowing what they want, and giving it to them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the key takeaway here.
I think so.
It's like comedy's about connection.
Yeah.
And giving people what they crave, whether it's laughter, or even and a little bit of insight along the way.
Absolutely.
This has been so interesting. I feel like I have a much better understanding of what's going on in the comedy world right now.
Yeah, and remember, the comedy landscape is always changing. There are new voices emerging all the time.
Right.
So pay attention. Yeah. Who you're enjoying, who you're watching. Yeah. And see if you can spot the trends, the strategies, the connections that are making these comedians stand out.
Yeah.
You might just discover the next big thing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for this.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate it.
Of course.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.